Sister Lucia of Fatima said the last great battle between our Lord and Satan is going to be over what? Marriage and the family. And the most intense attack today is over what? Yeah, children. The hearts, minds, and very bodies of our children. We started this apostolate, John Paul II, many years ago because we saw what happened from the sexual revolution in our own lives and our own marriages, and we saw the destruction around us and our friends and stuff. And so we started there. We started with engaged couples for the Diocese of Rockford. We still do that. We present to the engaged couples there before they get married, obviously. And but then we saw some problems. We saw that nobody was helping the younger people. College campuses we were on, it was just, they were totally foreign to the message that we were trying to give them. Today, 70% of all young people would consider themselves socialists. 90% of young people today would call themselves moral relativists. Very difficult, huh, to have a conversation with people when there is no truth. Stolen innocence came out of pain and suffering originally from my brother Danny. I'm the oldest of 5 boys. The fourth one down was sexually abused as a young person. We didn't know that until he was older. He never told us. Got into drugs. I don't have time to tell you that whole story. In drug rehab, they asked him if he had same-sex attractions. He got into a homosexual lifestyle at 25 years old. At 29, he was dying of AIDS. On his very deathbed, my brothers and I, everybody left the church. Danny, the fourth brother down, as he's dying, we found out months and months before he had come back into the Catholic Church, was receiving the sacraments. The priest that was giving him the sacraments when he could no longer get there was coming into the house. On his deathbed, I see the tendons on his neck. The hospice people said he's gone. He won't react to you. I saw the tendons on his neck as he heard our voices. And I saw him rise from death, basically. And I touched his hand. I said, Danny, you can hear us, can't you? And his eyes opened. And he tried to get up. And so we helped him up. And he said, let's pray. But his mouth was really dry. I said, Danny, did you say let's pray? And he said, pray to God, really clearly. And again, I don't have time to go through that experience, but there I was reconverted to the Catholic faith, as some of my other brothers were, and we realized the power of stolen innocence. What happens to young people when you take the innocence away from them and you try to fill it with lies and distortions, right? I was in a high school retreat. I walked in there, again, 15, 16-year-olds, co-ed group. And I just got there with a team. I bring a team of younger people with me. And I just threw out, anybody in youth ministry knows it's an icebreaker, right? Just to get them to talk a little bit. And I ask a question. I look over at a young lady and I said, yes, young lady. She said, call me they. And I said, oh, Holy Spirit, you got me fast, didn't you? I just walked into the situation, right? And I look over at her. She's a very serious young lady, right? I don't know her background. I don't know what her history is. You have to be very, very careful with young people, right? And so it's a process. And I said, I'm looking at her, she's looking at me, and I said, I'm a simple guy. I said, I just walked in here. I said, I don't even know your names. Now I got to learn all your pronouns. I said, it's going to be too much for me. So just for now, and if you don't like it, the next session will change, right? Just for now, can I call you a beloved child of God? And she, by the grace of God, nodded her head yes. And I said, how about you? And you nodded your head. I said, me too. I'm a beloved child of God. We all have the same heritage. And we took those young people that they told us don't want silence or anything, we took them right into prayer, where we get below the surface of this crazy world, and we sat there. And when I asked those kids to pray for something that's on their hearts, on their mind, pray for people, it's amazing, amazing, amazing beauty that happens. It'll tear your heart out when you hear those kids. And you know that we're doing the right thing when we're there for them. I was talking to I had the boys. I had the boys for 2 sessions. Somebody else had the girls. And in the afternoon, we're going to come together for this co-ed retreat. And they told me about Alex. Alex's dad was literally in prison. Sometimes they tell me these things about certain kids so I can watch out for them a little bit. This one's on the spectrum. This is this is it. It's good to know, right? And so I got the boys by themselves. and it's a small group setting, and telling them about what love is, and how a young man would treat a woman if he really loved her. And he goes like this. I said, anybody got any questions? And Alex raises his hand. I think he's going to be sarcastic. He goes, so, Mr. Rigert, what you're telling me is sex is not just sex, right? And I go, duh, Alex, no, sex is not just sex. But he got it. The light bulb went off. 16 years old, Catholic school, never understood that sex was more than just sex. And he wasn't the only boy in there, right? Anyways, we're having lunch after 2 sessions. We're going to do these final sessions with the girls, and the counselor comes over to me and she says, Jack, we got to change up the afternoon session. And I go, why? And she said, well, the boys told the girls what you told the boys about how a young man should treat him if he really loved them, and the girls want you to tell them what you told the boys. And I said, okay. About 10 or 15 minutes into a conversation with these young women, 16-year-olds, about how a young man would treat him if he really loved him, and a young girl started to cry. And I almost stopped. I looked over at the counselor. She said, just keep going. And so I did, and I asked the counselor later on, I said, tell me why that young girl was crying. She said, I knew as the relationship with this boy got more and more physical, sexual, I had an emptiness in my heart. I felt like I was being used. Was this love? Is love really just a feeling? Is it really just sex? That's the first man, she's talking about me, that ever stood up, I don't have a father in my home, that told me what love was and how I should be treated if somebody really loved me. And it was so beautiful that I started to cry. It was so beautiful that I started to cry.
Let me ask you a question. What would you do if I told you that your child was being sexually harassed? Would you call the police? Would you demand that charges be filed against their abuser? Now what if I told you that your child was being not only sexually harassed, but shown pornography in an effort to groom them for sexual activity? What if they were being groomed for homosexual activity? What if they were being groomed for sex with pedophiles? Wouldn't you keep them as far away from those people and places where those things were happening as you possibly could? Now here's the big question. What if I told you all these things were happening to your child in their school classroom? Is it hard to believe? Of course it is. No one wants to believe that their children are being groomed. No one wants to believe that there's anything other than the best of intentions behind everything taught in our kids' schools. Surely this is just a mistake, a misunderstanding. Maybe it's just being blown way out of proportion. Or maybe it's true.
Up until now, we've been learning about the possible negative consequences of having sex and the importance of keeping a relationship real. The reality is, the majority of middle and high school students are not having sex, but at some point later in their lives, they may feel like they are ready to have sex. That's a big decision. I mean, really big. Once a couple's made a decision to have sex, whether it's vaginal, anal, or oral sex, it's important they discuss ways to protect themselves against STDs and pregnancy. One of the ways to be responsible about having sex is to use condoms. Condoms or rubbers are made of latex, polyurethane, or plastic. Condoms are shaped like long balloons, and they fit over the penis before sex. If a condom is used correctly, and if it is used every single time, it helps reduce the chances of getting pregnant or an STD. But it won't reduce these chances if you don't use them. But as with all new things, it's a good idea to practice until a person feels confident they can use a condom correctly.
If you ever have the chance to look at a comprehensive sex education curriculum, you're going to see that they have objectives. Now, there are objectives that they write down, and then there's objectives overall for the ideology behind comprehensive sex education. Their objective is to increase the use of condoms, that people use them consistently, including children, which means that they're going to teach them not only how to use condoms, educate them on STDs, how they're transmitted, getting testing, but it's also about how do you convince your sexual partner to use that condom, which means that they role play and practice eroticizing the use of condoms and lubrication to convince your partner to use it. So it's not just about talking about the biology of things. It's also teaching children and adults, but I want to focus on children here, teaching them about sexual activity, assuming that they're going to be sexual at a young age, teaching them about the various ways they can be sexual and how to eroticize the use of condoms with their partners, and then getting tested and having abortions. Now, this is all in the name of quote unquote health. What's really happening though, the full ideology of this is that they want to sexualize children. They groom the children for sexual activity.
Monica Klein is founder of It Takes a Family, a nonprofit dedicated to restoring the roles of parents in the family. She worked as a comprehensive sex educator for 10 years.
Now, when I first started, they provided me with my training about STDs. They also recommended that I learn how to share this message with children. And they recommended that I speak to Planned Parenthood for that. And they were just across the street from our office. So I was invited across the street to Planned Parenthood, where the director of sex education for the Austin area trained me on how to share this message with children. And she was a woman from the community. And so people really trusted her as well. She was older. She just looked like a really sweet grandma, to be honest. And so she sat me down and made the case of why this was important to share this message with children. And so she let me know that there was girls as young as 10 coming into the clinic for abortions. They had STDs. And that really shocked me because, in all honesty, when I was in middle school or high school, I was not sexually active. So I couldn't believe that girls as young as 10 were sexually active and that these things were happening to them. So I quickly asked her, I said, all right, you've convinced me this is a really real problem. Teach me how to teach these girls how to avoid sex, how not to have sex. And she reached over and patted me on the knee and she said, no, dear, we're not teaching them not to have sex. We're just going to teach them how to do it safer. She said, we meet them where they're at and we teach them how to do it safer. So if you are talking to these girls and they're telling you that they're sexually active and you tell them not to have sex, you're judging them. We teach them how to do it safer.
Any of you working with young people, you'll come into contact a lot of time with young people that nobody has talked to them about sex at all because parents have abdicated the child's education and also the sexual education to the culture. And these kids are really suffering because of that.
The indoctrination of our children isn't only through social emotional learning and graphic sex ed content. It's also prevalent in the books our kids read that are not necessarily part of their textbooks. It's in the kids' books section of our school and public libraries as well.
I am reading a book that is available at Creekside Middle School. So 11-year-olds have access to this book. And it is called It's Perfectly Normal. Masturbation is touching or rubbing of your body's sex organs for pleasure because it feels good. One term for masturbating is playing with yourself. Some people think that masturbation is wrong or harmful, and some religions call masturbation a sin, but masturbation cannot hurt you. It doesn't result in pregnancy or get passing infections that are spread by sexual contact. Many people masturbate, many don't. Whether you masturbate or not is your choice. Masturbating is perfectly normal. When people masturbate, they usually rub their sex organs with their hands or something soft like a pillow. A girl often rubs her clitoris, a boy often rubs his penis. But the clitoris and penis are sensitive to the touch.
We've uncovered, not necessarily used as a curriculum here, but it is definitely in many of our public libraries, is the book called It's Perfectly Normal. And in that book, it promotes that kind of lifestyle, homosexuality lifestyle. And it teaches the kids at the age of 10, this book is geared for them at age of 10, that parents or anyone who objects to a homosexual lifestyle are bigoted and homophobic. And so that is a very dangerous path to go down, because you're advocating for that lifestyle against parents' wishes. And in some cases, it is being used as curriculum. And that's what's actually being taught in the schools. So it's advocating comprehensive sexuality education, advocates for the entire gamut of sexuality. It's not just sex as we would think of it. It's everything sexual, including the LGBT agenda.
So I want to show you what Illinois is doing, Pritzker and them, and Alexia Janulius, who's our Secretary of State, wants to ban, they're putting a law through, maybe you know this, that wants to ban parents from banning books in the schools. So in other words, you don't have a say in the books that go in there because we're experts. We leave that to the experts, right? And so this is going to be John Kennedy, the senator, in the Senate, speaking to our Secretary of State, trying to get that law passed, and Kennedy is questioning him on that. And wait till the very end, you'll see the power of this, how he wants to just move the parents away, right? Because there's no other way for him to express it.
I confess I'm a little confused, and I appreciate the argument or discussion that we've been having, but for me it's a little too conceptual, or I don't know, metaphysical or theological or whatever you want to call it. I want to try to understand what you're asking us to do. Let's take two books that have been much discussed. The first one is called All Boys Aren't Blue, and I will quote from it. I put some lube on and got him on his knees, and I began to slide into him from behind. I pulled out of him and kissed him while he masturbated. He asked me to turn over while he slipped a condom on himself. This was my ass, and I was struggling to imagine someone inside me. He got on top and slowly inserted himself into me. It was the worst pain I think I have ever felt in my life. Eventually, I felt a mix of pleasure with the pain. Close quote. All Boys Aren't Blue. The second is another much discussed book. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's called Genderqueer. Okay? Let me read an excerpt from that. Quote, I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on you. It will fit my favorite dildo perfectly. You're going to look so hot. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth. I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life. Then I want you inside of me. End quote. Now, Mr. Secretary, what are you asking us to do? Are you suggesting that only librarians should decide whether the two books that I just referenced should be available to kids? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. Tell me what you're saying.
Well, first of all, there's this...
Don't give me a speech. Tell me what you're asking me to do.
With all due respect, Senator, the words you spoke are disturbing, especially coming out of your mouth is very disturbing. But what I would also tell you that we're not advocating for kids to read porn, to Senator Booker's point.
What are you advocating for?
We are advocating for parents, random parents, not to have the ability, under the guise of keeping kids safe, to try and challenge the world view of every single manner on these issues.
You are random parents. right? And who are you to say what your kids should see or not see, right? This is pervasive right now. National Sex Ed Standards, everybody should get a copy of this. They're out on the second edition right now. Just Google it. This is all public stuff, right? Nobody's hiding anymore. Everybody's out in the open. Kumbaya, right? Get this and read it. I'll show you just a couple excerpts. This is a guide for teachers, whether you have this implemented or not. They're learning this in the schools. The teachers are learning this. The counselors are certainly learning this in school. And it gives you a guide. What should be told from preschool, then K through second, third through fifth, etc. What are the goals to teach these kids? Here's K through 2, standards by grade level, actually out of the National Sex Ed Standards. Congratulations, Annalise, this is in your school. Identify different kinds of families, nuclear, single parent, blended, blah, blah, blah. The question we have, why do we need this, right? Why do we need this in the school? So don't be afraid to ask those questions. Why do we need to be talking about this stuff in the schools, right? And of course, the answer is we don't have to. It shouldn't be in the schools. Again, K through second, define gender identity, gender role stereotypes. You're mixing kids up. These are little kids. They have no idea what you're saying to them, except that everything is perfectly normal. Here's your guidelines for teachers from 3 to 5. Define and explain differences between cisgender, transgender, gender non-binary, gender expansive, gender identity. That's where I said that young girl that when I walked into the class, call me they. I mean, this is what she's been brought up through, right? And again, it was not hard just to talk through these things with them. It's the first time they ever heard somebody actually explain it to them in a way they could understand, which is just the gospel. I mean, I'm not a genius. In 6th to 8th grade, now look, I have 7 grandkids, 6 of them are girls. They go from high school on down to 1-year-old. This is what, I know that innocent girl, 11-year-old, I could see her in my eyes, define vaginal, oral, and anal sex. This is why I do what I'm doing right now, because we're concerned about our kids. Okay, John Birch is really good. This guy's a smart dude. He has argued 12 cases in front of the Supreme Court.
Well, I'm always delighted to start with truth and love,
Yeah,
because those are two concepts that have just been abandoned by modern culture. And when I sat down to write the book, initially I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to jump right into gender ideology, what it is and what the church has to say about it, and realize that unless we have a common understanding of what truth and love are, you can't even have a discussion about the big questions in life. What is a man and a woman? What is the sex nature of the human body for? What is the meaning of life, and is it worth protecting? What does it mean to have human dignity? You can't ask those questions unless you understand truth and love. So just briefly, in our modern culture, among young people in particular, they've rejected any notion of an objective truth. For our teenagers and our college students, about 90% of them, they ascribe to moral relativism, where there is no objective truth. What's true for you is true for you. What's true for me is true for me. And it reduces everything to just a matter of opinion, because we can't ever agree on anything that's universally true for everyone. And modern Americans love this kind of relativism because it's very non-judgmental. So if I'm at work and there's someone else who's spouting a pro-abortion ideology, I don't need to confront them because, well, protecting life is a truth for me. It doesn't have to be for them. And so I don't need to engage in that conversation. So it's a polite way to step out and say, I'm not going to engage. But we all know that there is an objective truth. It's created by God, and he gave us the intellect so that we can rationalize what that truth is. And the church has been doing that for 2,000 years, starting with the words of Jesus, but using everything in the Bible to reveal truths about the human person. And, theology of the body, case in point there. And so we have to agree that there is a truth that can be discerned before we start the conversation. Love is a concept that's even more perverted in modern culture. From movies and TV shows and novels, this notion that love is just a feeling is pervasive. Everyone thinks that it's how I feel. If you've ever watched one of those dating shows, well, do I have a connection with someone? How do they make me feel? I feel really good when I'm with them. This must be love. That's not love at all. The Catholic Church and the Catechism teaches us that love is willing the good of the other. So it's not a feeling, it's an action, and we choose to do it. And it's one that's not tied to what the other person wants. It's tied to what's best for them. And as parents, we intuitively understand this, putting the love and the truth together. If my child wants to touch a hot stove and they really want to do it, they say it's going to make me so happy to do that. We still won't let them because, one, we know an objective truth that a hot stove will burn them and severely hurt them. And two, because we want what's best for them, we'll deny them the one thing that they desire and ask for the most, because that's what's best for them. That's what keeps them safe. That's what protects them. And so as we enter into these conversations with families and school boards and employers about gender ideology, we always need to approach it with both of those things. What's willing the best for others, but also what does the objective truth have to say about this subject? And so if we get those right, then everything else can flow from that. If we can get that portion of our identity right, I'm not non-binary, I'm not transgender, I'm not gay, I'm not a smoker, I'm not a pornography consumer. None of those defines who I am. Those are merely actions that I may have chosen in the past, but I'm free to choose something else because my identity is as a son or daughter of Christ. Once you get that, then we can have all kinds of conversations because the foundation has been done. Yeah, well, certainly there's a crisis. I would even say a pandemic. When it comes to our young people.
Yes.
And it starts with the schools. California has a curriculum now where they teach gender ideology beginning in kindergarten. So 5-year-olds are asked in class to say what their gender expression is and things like that. So it's certainly starting there. And the books that you were highlighting in the library, they're unbelievable. But where the infestation, I think, is the worst, where it's really toxic, is with the smartphones and the social media. And every Catholic parent needs to seriously consider whether their child even needs a smartphone before age 16, and whether they've got access to a computer that the parents don't supervise, whether they have social media accounts. In our family, we didn't allow those until the kids turned 18 and were going to college. And it's because there is a pervasive amount of content on TikTok and on Instagram and other places that are all pushing the LGBT agenda generally, but the trans agenda in particular. And then it doesn't even stop with the social media, because if you're not careful, the regular media that your kids consume will have it too. As I talk about in the book, just a couple of years ago, during this month, June, which is officially Pride Month in the United States, there was an episode on Blue's Clues. And if you're not a parent with a young child, you don't know that Blue's Clues is kind of this combination cartoon and live action show that's targeted for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. And so 20 years ago, when our kids were little, sometimes we let them watch Blue's Clues. So 3 years ago in June, during Pride Month, they had a pride parade on Blue's Clues. And every single float in the parade, it was the ants go marching one by one was the tune. Each float highlighted a different aspect of LGBT culture. And one of the floats, there was a family of beavers. And there was a young girl beaver who had tape over her breasts where they had been removed. She had had a mastectomy. And in case there was any doubt about that, someone asked the show's producers, were you really showing kids a young girl who had had her breasts removed to promote gender ideology? And they said yes. So if you were throwing a load of laundry in, or you were making dinner and your 4-year-old was watching Blue's Clues, that was the propaganda that they were being exposed to. And so as parents, it's crucial that we know what these issues are about, and that we be cognizant of the way culture is trying to influence our kids, because at the very youngest ages possible, they're being influenced in the worst possible ways to adopt transgender mentalities.
Gender dysphoria, I think there's a lot of questions in our minds about this. What is this? What can we do about it? I think this is a short clip. This is worth watching, just so you kind of get a little base, right?
So back to the science then, so kind of leaving the social group aside, there are a number of young people who actually have diagnosable gender dysphoria. That you can go to a psychologist, and they have this intense feeling that they're not born in the right body. Now, this sounds maybe foreign concept to many people, but there are lots of dysphorias, and this isn't the only one. The most common one that many people have had at least a family member experience has to do with anorexia.
Yeah, my youngest daughter had anorexia.
Yeah, exactly. Many families have struggled with this, and so as you know, hopefully your listeners know, that's where someone has that same type of dysphoria, this disconnection that their body is too fat, when that's not the objective truth. Yeah. And so they'll do anything that they can to try to get thinner, even though it hurts them. And at one point, going back to the importance of dealing with this issue with love and compassion, and truth, you would never tell your anorexic daughter, yeah, if you feel that you're too fat, you should eat less, and we'll even pay for the surgery to reduce your stomach size so that you'll eat less. That would be the most cruel, horrible thing that you could do. No, instead, what we want to do is help them align their mind with the objective truth of their body. So these kids who are experiencing the gender dysphoria, they do have a suicide rate that's about 12 times higher than the general population. They need love, compassion, counseling, certainly, but accompaniment at every step of the way. We have to take that seriously. We can't just, push it to the side as though that's something that's going to go away, because it needs to be treated just like anorexia needs to be treated.
Yes.
But the medical evidence shows, best long-term studies in the world, that for those who have gone through a complete transition, so they had the surgery, that they have a suicide rate that's 19 times the general population. Higher rates of suicidal death, higher rates of medical problems across the board because of the transition, but also higher incidences of mental health problems. And so affirming and a transition is not a panacea. And so what we see in Europe, where a lot of this care, if you want to call it that, put that in air quotes, was pioneered much earlier than the United States, is that they're all pulling back. UK, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, they're closing down the gender transformation clinics because not only is the surgery harmful, but the cross-sex hormones and the puberty blockers are harmful for them too. And my book was published last fall, and almost every month since then, there's been a new study recognizing how harmful all of these treatments are for young people. That the puberty blockers cause all kinds of physical difficulties. The doctors in the United States will say, well, it's just a pause button. You can always unpause it later. That's not true. It'll lead to loss of bone density, muscular developmental problems, psychosexual problems, as well as problems with sexual physical development, all those things. The cross-sex hormones, it's even worse, including heart issues and other mental health problems.
Would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter? That's quite a thing to ask a set of parents, isn't it? That was basically the choice that was presented to my parents. Either let us pump your 13-year-old child full of irreversible experimental treatments, or you may be responsible for their death. The professionals claimed I would experience suicidal ideation if I didn't transition. And the truth is, they were only half wrong. I did contemplate suicide as a teenager, but that came after all the hormones, after the social transition, after a surgeon ignored his Hippocratic oath to do no harm and surgically removed my healthy breasts, leaving scars, infection, and ongoing pain in their place. After years of turmoil and irreversible damage to my body, I realized two things I should have known all along. First, the doctors could only mold me to something that superficially resembled a man, but could never truly make me a man. And second, that even the most convincing superficial changes could not resolve the issues I had going on underneath that drove me to my transition in the first place. That is why I detransitioned and now live my life as the woman I truly am. Gender theory activists would like to have you believe that my story is unique, that my regret is the rare exception to the rule, but as much.
Okay, so I'm going to show you two real quick clips of Love Ed. And you're going to see a whole different side. And you're going to go, oh, thank you, Jesus, that we have a solution to this, right? Because you can see this is a difficult thing, right, to talk about.
My husband John and I have begun the endeavor to teach our 3 boys about God's plan for love, for life, for marriage.
We want to make sure that our kids are living the faith, and we know that that's not always easy.
There are those outside influences on our children that are difficult to control, and those are the real challenges.
They're getting messages from the world all the time, billboards, commercials, magazines.
So it gets harder for us as parents to make sure that they're on that right pathway.
It's so important to be able to, as parents, have a resource, have a roadmap to utilize, to steer them and to guide them.
Love Ed helps parents educate their children about the meaning of love and life. It guides them together on a conversational journey to learn how to overcome the struggles of adolescence and how to develop the virtues they need to make the right choices. Love Ed reveals how God created the entire universe for love, and it shows how each of us have an important role in His divine plan. It gives parents the knowledge they need to teach their children the right biological facts at the right time, and it gives their children the practical advice they need to be strong, smart, and pure. Love Ed helps parents bond with their children and helps children understand their faith, so they can journey forward confidently, knowing that their family and the church are there to guide them on their way.
I wish that growing up that I would have had something like this to be able to draw strength from.
It makes you feel better as a parent because you know you're on the right path.
We can now approach our children with so much more confidence.
There's no other program that I've seen like this where it helps you open up the conversation.
You can see the contrast, can't you? I mean, you really start to see the contrast between something like this and helping the kids and that earlier presentation, right? So real quick on Love Ed. So Love Ed, two important times for kids to be talking to their parents about this. When they're coming out of the age of innocence, entering into puberty, so 9 to 11 years old. Let's call it 5th grade-ish about, right? 9 to 11. And again, right before they go to high school. And what we're doing in there is two things. We're giving them the biology, what's changing in their bodies, right? These little girls are confused, the little boys are confused. What's going on in your body and what is it all about, huh? What is love? And then the second thing is so important. They're bonding with mom. They're bonding with dad. I was up in Crystal Lake last night. We did level 2 up there. We had presented a number of times up there already. Level 2, so these are 7th and 8th grade boys I had. With their dads, and they always come in nervous, right? The dads especially are nervous. What am I going to do? What am I going to say, right? And it's such a comfortable thing. It's so beautiful. Same thing with the boys, right? They've seen things they probably shouldn't have seen really at that age already, and you can see the way they act and stuff, and I could almost identify who's had some issues and stuff by now. But anyways, here's the thing. At the end, we do a little blessing at the very end. We show them 5 acts, 5 scenes, and each in between, the dad with his boy, mom with the girl, they discuss these things. And that's where the real richness, the fruit comes out of, is that discussion. But you have a book, everything comes out of it. So easy to do. You're always going to run out of time. That's the biggest issue. We don't give you a ton of time, and these boys start talking, the dads start talking. But here's at the end. After the blessing at the very end with some holy water, the father blesses the son blesses the dad. How many of those dads and those boys hugged each other? That's the fruit. That's what we want. We want that little boy, that young man, even at 7th or 8th grade, to go home, and if he has a question, to be able to say, Dad, can I talk to you about something? That's the fruit of this. One last story. So we were down in a Spanish-speaking church down in Aurora, and we were presenting in Spanish, and so we had this 12-year-old girl with her mom there, and the girl at the end was crying. And so Isabel, one of our Spanish-speaking presenters, went over that little girl and she said, "Are you okay?" And she said, "I had all these questions. I never knew I could ask my mom. My mom never talked to me about anything. She never even told me what a period was." And her mom's standing there. And then her mom starts to cry. And she says, "Now I can. Now we can talk." And so it was such a relief. And then again, they hugged, right? I mean, this is the beauty of this, right? This is the beauty of this. And it's a one-night thing. We give you a book, and then you bring it home. There's 6 more sessions that you do at home, but really nice. It's organic. We've unpacked the big stuff, the hard stuff. Everybody's talking. And then we have 6 more, 20 minutes at home. And it's very fruitful.